Imagine a political system where billionaires, corporations, and secretive nonprofits control elections from behind the scenes. Well, you don't really need to imagine it because this is not a dystopian fantasy. It's a grim reality in the United States where dark money and other dubious financial practices shape campaigns, distort democracy, and deepen public mistrust. The U.S. political system has become a marketplace where elections are bought and policy is sold. Dark money and super PACs empower the wealthy to drown out ordinary voters, while foreign governments like Qatar exploit the system to push their agendas. At the same time, many politicians are uninterested in actually serving the public and view public office simply as a stepping stone to their own personal enrichment, engaging in bribery and influence peddling. U.S. elections are increasingly dominated by secretive financial practices that shape campaigns and governmental policy from behind the scenes. At the center of this labyrinth lies dark money, which is a terminology used to describe the fact that the system allows anonymous donors to funnel vast sums of money into elections by passing disclosure laws and distorting the democratic process. However, dark money is just the tip of the iceberg. There are other corrupt financial practices, including super PACs, exploitation, lobbying networks, and foreign interference, all working in tandem to skew political outcomes. Bribery scandals further entangle politicians into financial webs where elected officials use public office to enrich themselves. Now, to understand all of this, you first have to go back to 2010, where the most infamous change occurred in the Supreme Court decision of Citizens United versus FEC, which unleashed a tidal wave of unrestricted spending. Dark money infiltrates elections primarily through nonprofit organizations classified as 501c4, social welfare groups, and 501c6 trade associations, who can now spend millions on political advertisements and campaigns without revealing who is bankrolling them. These groups are legally allowed to engage in political advocacy without revealing their donors, provided that politics is not their primary purpose. In reality, many nonprofits blur these lines, acting as covert arms of political campaigns. High-profile examples illustrate how this system operates. Americans for Prosperity, which is an organization tied to the Koch brothers, spent more than $115 million during the 2012 elections to oppose Barack Obama's policies, all without disclosing its funding sources. Similarly, Priorities USA Action, a super PAC supporting Hillary Clinton, used undisclosed contributions during the 2016 election to sway public opinion in her favor. Dark money of this nature now makes up hundreds of millions of dollars that are poured into every election cycle, making it impossible for ordinary citizens to know who is influencing their elections and leaders. Dark money's power lies in influence without accountability. By shielding the identities of donors, it prevents voters from understanding who is shaping the political narrative. This secrecy creates a sense of cynicism among the public, who feel alienated from a system seemingly rigged in favor of the wealthy. Campaigns backed by dark money receive disproportionate media exposure, allowing candidates with anonymous donors to dominate airwaves and outcompete rivals reliant on small donations. This shadow economy fuels not only smear campaigns and biased ads, but also other corrupt financial practices, creating a wild west of unregulated political financing. This flood of anonymous cash doesn't just fund ad campaigns, it skews political competition. Candidates supported by dark money receive a significant advantage, drowning out rivals who rely on transparent small dollar donations. This inequality undermines the democratic principle of fair elections, transforming politics into a game where wealth often trumps merit and where special hidden interests dominate the public interest. Now let's look at the corrupt legal machine of super PACs. Super PACs play another starring role in financial corruption. The 2010 Citizens United vs. FEC ruling opened the floodgates for the creation of super PACs, committees that are allowed to raise unlimited sums from corporations, unions, and individuals, provided they don't coordinate directly with candidates. But while super PACs are technically prohibited from coordinating directly with candidates, many find ways to exploit loopholes. For example, candidates' former staffers often run these committees, creating an ecosystem where political operations and independent expenditures blur to one, and uncoordinated events are thinly disguised as campaign rallies. Examples of this manipulation abound. Super PACs also use creative tactics to exploit regulatory loopholes. For instance, during the 2018 midterms, Florida Governor Rick Scott's Senate campaign skirted coordination rules by funneling funds from a PAC he formerly controlled. In 2024, Ron DeSantis' campaign transferred $80 million from his gubernatorial fund to a supporting super PAC, exploiting loopholes that allowed the transfer of funds after DeSantis formally relinquished control. Similarly, in the 2024 presidential election, a super PAC backing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. employed bridge funding, accepting large donations and then repaying them later to artificially inflate fundraising totals, giving the illusion of more widespread support than he actually had. Super PACs not only drown out regular voters, but also serve as access points for foreign and corporate interests. For instance, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, two businessmen with ties to Ukraine, made large donations to a pro-Trump super PAC using their influence to lobby for the removal of U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. This transactional nature of politics reveals how money buys not only campaign exposure, but also policy outcome and personal favors. These practices also highlight how super PACs function as the playground of elites. Wealthy donors effectively buy political influence by channeling millions through these committees, sidelining the interests of ordinary voters. While dark money and super PACs dominate campaign finance, the corruption doesn't end there. Lobbying, another tool of influence, plays a significant role in shaping policy. Corporations and special interest groups spend billions lobbying lawmakers to promote favorable legislation, often using campaign donations as leverage. Industries like healthcare, finance, and energy are notorious for flooding campaigns with contributions, ensuring they have lawmakers in their pocket when regulations are on the table. Now, some financial practices cross the line from unethical to illegal. The U.S. has seen numerous scandals involving foreign contributions, straw donors, which are individuals donating on behalf of others to skirt the legal limits, and illicit coordination between PACs and campaigns. In the 2020 election cycle, multiple candidates were accused of accepting foreign money or engaging in fraudulent donation schemes. Although lax enforcement by the Federal Elections Committee, or the FEC, often allows violators to escape accountability. In fact, foreign money has become an increasingly sinister element in U.S. elections. Governments like Qatar use political donations and soft power to influence both domestic and foreign policy. Qatar has faced allegations of funding terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Al-Qaeda, while simultaneously maintaining strong diplomatic ties with the U.S. government. This dual strategy allows Qatar to project influence while evading scrutiny. Qatar's involvement in U.S. politics extends beyond donations. It has invested heavily in lobbying and educational institutions, funding American universities to shape public narratives and foster favorable policies. Some speculate that Qatar leverages its financial clout not only to protect its interests, but also to promote Islamist groups abroad, complicating the U.S.'s diplomatic relations with allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Though there are official agreements between the U.S. and Qatar to combat terrorism financing, reports show that Doha's oversight over private donors and charities remains inconsistent. And now let's talk about bribery, of course. In addition to election financing schemes, many politicians engage in outright bribery, using their positions to secure personal wealth. Bribes often take the form of campaign contributions, luxury gifts, or lucrative speaking fees. For example, former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich was famously convicted for attempting to sell Barack Obama's vacated Senate seat. Similarly, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez faced federal bribery charges for allegedly accepting gifts and cash from businessmen in exchange for political favors. Beyond individual cases, the practice of revolving doors between public office and the private sector creates a systemic corruption. Politicians frequently leave office to take high-paying jobs as lobbyists, using their insider knowledge and connections to influence policy. Some lawmakers even trade stocks based on confidential information obtained through their roles, enriching themselves while eroding public trust. And for some reason, insider trading is only not allowed in the private sector. Additionally, political candidates and their allies exploit ad revenue and media ventures to fund campaigns indirectly. For example, Ted Cruz's podcast received sponsorship dollars that flowed to a super PAC backing the Senate re-election campaign. Such murky financial arrangements illustrate how the lines between campaign financing and personal business interests are increasingly blurred. The consequences of this unregulated financial landscape are severe. Campaigns fueled by hidden donations and unaccountable spending erode public trust in government, reinforcing a sense of cynicism and disengagement among voters. Surveys show that many Americans believe the political system is rigged in favor of wealthy donors, leaving ordinary citizens feeling powerless. Even those skeptical about the extent of corruption acknowledge that the sheer influence of money in politics undermines democratic norms. Moreover, the emphasis on fundraising drives a wedge between elected officials and their constituents. Candidates spend more time courting donors than engaging with voters, and policymakers become beholden to the interests of those who fund their campaigns. This creates a vicious cycle where the wealthy enjoy privileged access to lawmakers, while marginalized communities struggle to have their voices heard. But can reform save democracy? While reform efforts have gained traction, such as proposals to enhance transparency and close loopholes, the path forward is fraught with challenges. If democracy is to survive, the American public must demand accountability from both politicians and donors, pushing for campaign finance reform that restores trust and ensures elections truly reflect the will of the people. Political elites benefit from the current system, and they are unlikely to dismantle it without public pressure. The Supreme Court's rulings have also made it difficult to impose new limits on political spending, framing money as a form of free speech. But without such reforms, the U.S. risks becoming a plutocracy, where power is concentrated in the hands of those wealthy enough to buy it, leaving voters with little more than the illusion of choice. The story of dark money and financial corruption in U.S. elections reveals a political system increasingly driven by wealth rather than democratic values. Although reform efforts offer a glimmer of hope, the fight against financial corruption in politics is far from over. As long as the political economy remains dominated by hidden donations and elite interests, the promise of a government by the people, for the people, will remain elusive. The American public must demand greater transparency and accountability to restore faith in the electoral process. Until then, democracy will continue to be at the mercy of those who can afford to buy it. If you guys enjoyed this video, you should be sure to subscribe to my channel down below, and you should also watch this next video over here, which YouTube thinks you're really going to enjoy. Thank you guys all so much for watching.